Hello and welcome to Devil's Advocate. With allegations of corruption swirling in the air and dominating the news, how should we view the morality of our politicians and judges? That's the key issue I shall touch upon today with one of India's most highly respected former Chief Justices, Judicial Verma. Chief Justice Verma, almost without a break since the summer of 2010, India has been assaulted by scam after scam, covering the entire political spectrum. What impression have you formed of the morality of our politicians?
I'm completely disgusted.
Disgusted is a strong word. Do you mean it?
Of course. Absolutely.
Let's then begin this interview by first talking about what Congress General Secretary Digvijay Singh said to this program just a week ago. He said he was aware of things done by Mr. Vajpayee's foster son-in-law and Mr. Advani's children, which not only would embarrass their parents, but were, he said, equivalent to corruption and wrongdoing. Yet he also insisted that he would never reveal what he knew. What do you make of that position?
Well, that's a very disturbing statement. Whether true or false, it has serious ramifications for our democratic polity. It reveals, if true, a conspiracy at the top against the combating of corruption, which people are talking all the time, and it shows that political morality is at its lowest ebb.
In fact, Mr. Digvijay Singh is a public servant, and as a public servant, doesn't he have a moral duty, perhaps even a legal duty, to A, expose wrongdoing, and B, bring the wrongdoers to justice?
I think every citizen has that duty. That's one of the fundamental duties in Article 51A of the Constitution.
So when Mr. Digvijay Singh, as General Secretary of the Congress Party, speaking in public, says that he is aware of things done by Mr. Vajpayee's children or Mr. Advani's children, which he believes are tantamount to corruption or wrongdoing, and yet refuses to reveal them, then he is letting down his dignity and his responsibility as a public servant.
That, I think, is the minimum which can be said.
So
There's a much higher responsibility in a person who holds a position where his word counts.
So how strongly do you criticize the position taken by Digvijay Singh?
Well, I would say, in either case, if it is untrue, then it's unfair to the people who are named. If it is true, then it's a very serious matter, and it's not a personal matter. It has got something to do with the nation as a whole. And I'm really very disturbed that that should be the understanding at the top.
In fact, if he refuses to reveal what he considers to be evidence of wrongdoing, even possibly corruption, can he not be accused of a cover-up or of protecting wrongdoers?
As a matter of fact, the law enforcement agencies should take serious note of it and try to get the information.
You said something very important. The law enforcement agencies should on their own, suo moto, take attention and note of what Digvijay Singh has said.
Because if what's said is true, that indicates something in the nature of very serious criminal offense, and it is the duty of the law enforcement agencies under the rule of law to ensure that the rule of law is maintained.
And you're also therefore implying, I presume, that if the law enforcement agencies don't take note of what Mr. Digvijay Singh has said and don't question him, they are not doing their job.
Well, that's the impression for long.
Now, Mr. Digvijay Singh's defense is that it would not be ethical to target the children or the families of politicians who are not themselves in politics. What judgment do you form of that sort of ethics?
Well, we swear by the principle that Caesar's wife should also be above suspicion, which only means that not only the person in authority or power, the seat of power, but everyone in close proximity should also be above suspicion. Why? Because he or she can influence the seat of power, and therefore we are giving a go-by to that.
But what about Mr. Digvijay's point that it is not ethical to target the children and families of politicians if they themselves are not in politics?
Well, law is institutionalized morality. It's not divorced the morality. And as I said, anyone in a position to influence decision-making, you see, should be above suspicion. When we say of Caesar's wife, it doesn't mean literally his wife. It means everyone close to Caesar.
So you don't accept this new ethics that Mr. Digvijay Singh is adumbrating?
I think it's unethical.
It's unethical?
Yes.
In fact, Mr. Digvijay Singh is only one example of this so-called ethics. This same ethics determined the silence of the BJP in March 2011 when the Economic Times first revealed Robert Vadra's DLF connection and the dramatic manner in which his company's fortunes had ballooned. At the time, the BJP decided that it would not be ethical and proper to speak about Sonia Gandhi's son-in-law. Now, in that instance, speaking as a former Chief Justice, was that wise discretion on the BJP's part or wrongful silence?
It was failure of duty, because you see, personalities don't matter. According to me, you are placed in the hierarchy, the more strict standard of behavior you have to answer to. And therefore, the standard of ethics and morality at the highest level should be the highest.
You said something again that's very important. You're saying the BJP failed its duty when they kept silent after the Economic Times revealed Robert Vadra's connections with DLF.
I would say everyone and anyone who's in political life, a political party, they have a greater duty, because they claim to be doing national service, and it is, to my mind, national disservice.
So would you then also go one step further and say, given on the one hand Mr. Digvijay Singh's ethics and behavior, and given on the other the BJP's initial silence over Vadra, that the impression that's created is that politicians behave like a brotherhood which colludes to protect each other and sometimes colludes to cover up for each other?
Well, I would put it like this. It would indicate or reveal a conspiracy of silence to tolerate corruption at the highest level. And if that is the conspiracy of silence, to accept corruption at the highest level, where is the point in talking of combating corruption? Then it's mere hypocrisy. It has no meaning.
This is, I presume, not only completely against all the principles of our Constitution, but it is also a complete negation of the principles of morality.
Well, Clause B of Article 51A, Article 51A, which enumerates the fundamental duties, says, it is the duty of every citizen to cherish and follow the ideals which inspired the national struggle. I don't think these are the ideals which inspired the nation.
But the Constitution, of course, is something that's very important to you as a former Chief Justice.
No, that's every citizen.
But what about the principles of morality? Are those betrayed by this behavior of either Mr. Digvijay Singh or the silence of the BJP?
You see, when I said constitutional fundamental duties, they merely encapsulate what was a part of the Indian ethos. It refers to the principles which inspired the freedom struggle.
So this is un-Indian behavior.
Of course.
This is letting down Indian culture.
Yes.
This is letting down India's image and reputation.
It's totally anti that.
In which case, how depressing, maybe I should say how distressing is it that politicians across the spectrum choose to cover up for each other, choose not to expose each other, choose deliberately to be silent about the lapses of each other. How distressing is that?
It is very depressing, and that is what is giving credence to people who have come to the streets, which is undemocratic according to me. National institutions ought to be strengthened, which have become weak, not taking to the streets. But that is what is promoting that, because of the anger against corruption.
So this sort of behavior on the part of politicians is fueling and encouraging, and perhaps even gaining support for Arvind Kejriwal and that sort of protest.
You see, without naming any names, the question is anyone who speaks or tries to mobilize anger against corruption gets a fillip.
And here, when politicians behave like this, they are providing that fillip, they are providing that encouragement.
That justification.
And in fact, then I presume they're also providing justification for people who say the Indian system stinks. They are proving it stinks.
Yes, yes, sir. If you compare with what happened last few days, Rajat Gupta there and the former Prime Minister of Italy, for much lesser things, they have been convicted.
And yet in India, politicians know about lapses of politicians, but cover up, they don't convict.
Yes.
So this is bringing our politics, this is bringing our democracy into disrepute.
Well, Rajat Gupta must be ruining the day. He decided to do all what he did there elsewhere. If he was here, he would be safe.
Quite right. He could have got away with it in India, you're suggesting.
Well, he would not even have been investigated.
But the bigger point, I take it, is that this sort of behavior, this sort of so-called ethics on the part of our politicians is destroying our democracy.
I think ethics is a misnomer in this context. There's no ethics. It is unethical.
Let me briefly play devil's advocate to that position. You know and I know that journalists and lawyers are well aware of the misdemeanors committed by other members of their fraternity, but we choose to keep quiet. We also find that doctors, businessmen and chartered accountants are aware of the misdemeanors of members of their fraternity. They too keep quiet. All of us adopt the attitude that it is wisest and best to mind your own business and keep your nose out of other people's affairs. If that's okay for us to do, then why is it not okay for politicians to do?
It is equally wrong for every one of us, and particularly for those whose voice counts. For them, silence is not an option. They have a duty to speak, and if they don't speak, they are failing in the performance of their duty.
So politicians have a higher duty, a higher moral responsibility than the rest of us?
Well, I think the judges have the highest responsibility, and politicians at the top level certainly. What is disturbing me is, if at the top the political system has become like that, then they being in a position to give, distribute benefits, others can be corrupted.
Let's come to two specific examples. First, Nitin Gadkari, who faces serious charges, although I must say they have not by any means been proven. But what is the morally right thing for the president of the BJP to do? Should he stand aside until his name is cleared, or does he have a right to continue until he's found guilty?
Well, forget individuals. What I would say, if there is any prima facie evidence which any reasonable person would accept as evidence, then there is a moral duty not to wait for the outcome in a court of law. One must step down.
And does it follow that the higher the post you hold,
yes, the greater the responsibility,
and the greater the willingness expected of you to stand aside when there is a slur on your reputation?
Well, you would recall I had said that for Balkrishnan also.
Absolutely.
And even for Sabharwal, I had told him that unless you explain, you
said quite clearly in the case of Balkrishnan, when he was Chief Justice, he should stand aside.
Yes.
Similarly, you're saying to Gadkari, stand aside till your name is cleared.
Yes.
Another person who today also faces allegations of impropriety is Robert Vadra. He's not a politician, but he is Sonia Gandhi's son-in-law. In his case, he's chosen to be silent, which is of course his prerogative. But do you believe in this instance silence is wise, or does it suggest that he doesn't have a defense?
Well, I would say like this. Who believes that he's a totally private person? As I said, when we say Caesar's wife should be above suspicion, it means everyone in close proximity.
Including Caesar's son-in-law?
Everyone. Not only that, in the restatement of values which I drafted and which is now going to form a part of the law of judicial accountability, the reason why close relations of judges are not supposed even to live with them, or mix with them, that is the reason.
In this specific case, Ashok Khemka, the former Inspector General of Registration, who attempted to inquire into Robert Vadra's land holdings in Haryana, was summarily transferred, and that too late at night. Looking at that as a judge, does that look like a suspicious development?
Well, the facts of the case, since I would not know, I would not comment, but I would say this. The appearance is certainly something which is not desirable.
As you now look back over the last 2 years of scam after scam after scam, would you say that this constitutes one of the most depressing, distressing periods India has been through since independence?
Well, I had never hoped to see this day in my lifetime.
And so the fact that you're having to live through it distresses you?
Yes, certainly. It's so depressing. Every morning is more depressing than the previous one.
Justice Verma, let's take a break at that point. When we come back, I want to talk to you about allegations of corruption against the judiciary and ask you, how do you view the judicial fraternity? That's in a moment's time. See you after the break. Welcome back to Devil's Advocate and an interview with one of India's most highly regarded former Chief Justices, Justice Verma. Justice Verma, let's come to allegations of corruption against the judiciary. First, former Chief Justice Bharucha said that 20% of judges are corrupt. Then the Bhushan said that 50% of the last 16 Chief Justices of India are corrupt. And finally, Mamata Banerjee earlier this year has said You can pay money and get the judgment you want. As a former Chief Justice of India, how deep does the rot run in the judiciary?
As a matter of fact, much before Bharucha said that, I didn't refer to percentage because no one has made that count. But when I was asked by a journalist, I had said, I cannot say that there has not been even a single corrupt judge even in the Supreme Court. And you have that in public knowledge. So
you're saying to me that even in the Supreme Court there have been corrupt judges?
Well, I mean, we have had V. Ramaswamy's failed impeachment because of the political collusion.
Let me repeat my question. How deep then is the rot in the judiciary?
Well, it's like this. Only this morning I was telling someone, when I joined the bar 50 years back, no one talked lightly even about a district judge in the privacy of his drawing room.
And now?
And now people ask me about the judges even in the apex court, which makes me feel as if I have been slapped whenever that question has been asked.
You know, since 1993, that's almost 19 years, judges have actually been appointing judges themselves.
Yes.
How then do you account for the fact that corrupt men and women have become judges?
You see, it's like this. Some people show their true colors when they have reached where they have aimed for. Therefore, I have always advocated the need for an effective mechanism to enforce judicial accountability in the case of people who show their true colors later.
In other words, you're saying many people, when they reached the top of their profession
Yes.
and became part of the collegium that appoints judges, began to show signs of corruption.
Or after reaching there even without being in the collegium.
But this also suggests that judges deliberately either ignore or fail to explore allegations of corruption against fellow judges.
It's not that this phenomena has grown only after 1993.
It's always been there.
Well, I became a judge in the High Court 40 years back in
And this was,
72.
and there was corruption then as well.
Well, that was only exceptional, but then it started growing. So I had been talking about this thing even before I came to Supreme Court.
Justice Verma, in part one, very understandably, you castigated politicians for the way they collude and conspire to protect each other, to cover corruption within their fraternity, and to hide it from the world. Are judges any different?
Well, if they do, then I would condemn them more. I can only speak for myself. And I had inquiries conducted against a number of High Court judges, written to the Prime Minister, sending the papers. Well, the papers may or may not be there, but nothing happened.
You mean you, as a former Chief Justice, when you were Chief Justice,
When I was Chief Justice.
wrote to the Prime
Yes,
Minister
yes.
about judges,
Yes.
pointing out corruption
Yes.
amongst judges,
And recommending action being taken.
and the PM of the day ignored it?
Because there was not only that. In the case of my successor, I had to release that letter when Mr. Gujral said something which was incorrect.
Your successor was former Chief Justice Punchi.
Yes, the letter anyone has to read, 5-page letter.
You wrote a letter alleging
Well,
that Justice Punchi had
no,
cases of corruption against him.
No, what I wrote was all what was alleged against him, and also the absence of any mechanism for the purpose of going further. You see?
If at that time Mr. Gujral, who was Prime Minister, had expressed an interest to inquire, would you have taken the step of saying, I don't recommend Punchi as my successor?
As a matter of fact, now that you ask me this pointedly, let me tell you, I had already taken the steps. I was waiting for that till Mr. Gujral said they are just not going to do anything.
So
and so did the then president.
So Mr. Gujral's failure to act
And
meant
also the
you
president.
couldn't, but his failure to act meant you couldn't stop Punchi.
No, he said that, you see, we'll do nothing.
So here was an opportunity to stop a man who you thought was inappropriate and unsuitable becoming Chief Justice.
Because my own judgment of 93 said that the senior most person should be appointed unless he's certified to be unfit.
And in this case, you had reason to believe Punchi was unfit.
Only, but then I didn't have the proof.
Quite right.
Allegations
Gujral let you down.
You see, because allegations had to be proved, and that material was not there.
And that inquiry that you were hoping Gujral would order, he didn't order, as a result of which Punchi went through. Let me put it like this. We've talked about politicians being corrupt. We've talked about judges being corrupt. One rules us, the other ensures justice. What do you say to people who've heard this conversation and conclude India must be a corrupt country?
Actually, that is the real cause for my deep depression, you see. And well, the only thing I can do is to talk about it and not hold back what I feel, because I think I have a duty to speak, particularly when asked, but I keep talking very often, even without being asked.
For being so open and outspoken, Justice Verma, thank you very much indeed.
Yes.